Bob Woodward has a new book. He alleges former President Donald Trump secretly kept in touch with Russian President Vladimir Putin even after Donald Trump left office. The two have spoken as many as 7 times since he left the White House, all while Donald Trump was pressuring Republicans in Congress to block military aid to Ukraine. NBC News has not independently confirmed the new details laid out in that book, but that is what Woodward is writing. Joining us now, New York Times chief White House correspondent and MSNBC political analyst Peter Baker and NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. So, Peter, I'm going to begin with you. Lay out what Woodward says Donald Trump was doing with these phone calls.
Yeah, so Woodward in his new book, it's called War, and it's coming out next week, says that a Trump aide told him that he was outside of the former president's Mar-a-Lago office earlier this year, and they had been kicked out of the office because the former president said he was taking a call with Vladimir Putin, and that this aide told Woodward that it was one of a number of such calls, perhaps as many as 7. Now, there aren't any more details about it than that, and Woodward doesn't cite any other sources, and we haven't confirmed that separately either. But obviously, if this is the case, it adds a new wrinkle to the controversy over former President Trump's relationship with President Putin, which has always been the subject of a great deal of mystery and confusion and criticism.
Peter, I think my mic's on now. Do we know the time frame for when these calls were taking place? I just mentioned it in relation to Donald Trump lobbying Republicans not to give Ukraine money. Was it around that same time?
Woodward doesn't say. He says the one call he specifically references took place in early 2024, and that's as specific as it gets in the book. So we don't have any dates for any of the other calls. If there were, in fact, other calls, we can't, therefore, time them to say, aha, this took place when the House was voting X or Y. But clearly, it raises questions because Trump has said repeatedly that Putin is a genius, that he can solve the war in less than 24 hours, even before Inauguration Day if he's elected, and essentially has said he doesn't really seem to care too much whether Ukraine wins. The terms he and his running mate have seemed to focus on as a possible negotiating basis for a peace deal would involve Russia keeping all of the land in Ukraine that it is illegally seized by force, and Ukraine giving up any hopes of joining NATO and declaring its neutrality, giving a guarantee, in effect, to Russia. Those are, of course, terms that Putin would certainly like. Again, we don't know, what took place, if anything, in these conversations that might have taken place between Trump and Putin, but it raises new questions.
Yeah, and there were, the Russia investigation, Vaughn, was very much about the very many contacts that seemed to be between Donald Trump's campaign and Russia and Vladimir Putin and his orbit as well. There's also a little bit in this book about a COVID test. This is during the height of the pandemic, the beginnings of the pandemic, when COVID tests were in short supply. What is Woodward alleging?
Right. Again, this has to do with Vladimir Putin. And while Donald Trump was still president, Bob Woodward writes that Vladimir Putin, who did not go and travel abroad for 19 months, was highly concerned about contracting the virus himself. And in conversations with Donald Trump, the current Republican president of the United States, went on to, as Bob Woodward writes, secretly sent Putin a bunch of Abbott point-of-care COVID test machines for his personal use as the virus spread rapidly through Russia, to which Putin told Trump, quote, "Please don't tell anybody you sent these to me," which Trump replied, quote, "I don't care, fine," to which then Putin responded, no, I don't want you to tell anybody because people will get mad at you, not me. They don't care about me. Again, this really goes into detail about the relationship between these two men. I did reach out to 3 Trump campaign officials here over the last several hours about specifically whether Donald Trump has had any conversations with Putin since leaving the White House in 2021. We have not heard back from the campaign about that.
That's interesting. You'd think that if there was no contact, they would have said this is all untrue. They've never spoken to each other since Donald Trump left the White House. Maybe they still will do that. Do we know a little bit more about the sourcing around? I mean, that's some pretty verbatim dialogue that Woodward is putting into his book. Do you have more about the sourcing on that?
Right. It's a Trump aide is the sourcing of this here. We don't know who that aide is. But of course, Donald Trump has kept quite an insular circle around him ever since heading to Mar-a-Lago in 2021. There was a great number of people that that left his side thinking that he did not have a political future here. At the same time, we know that Donald Trump has continued to engage in conversations with other foreign leaders and other diplomats. And, of course, there's concern potentially about the violation of the Logan Act, which is to prevent private citizens from influencing improperly U.S. foreign policy. Of course, Michael Flynn was national security advisor to Donald Trump in February of 2017. He resigned after it was revealed that he had back-channel conversations with the Russians during the transition here. So there's a long, deep, complex history. But we know when Zelensky was meeting with Trump just a little over a week ago, of course, Donald Trump was asked about what could this deal potentially look like. And publicly, he has stayed away from trying to publicly negotiate the deal. But it's not clear to what extent privately is Donald Trump trying to influence this potential situation.
It would matter very much if he was having conversations with Vladimir Putin while he was out of office. It would matter very much. Vaughn Hilliard, Peter Baker, gentlemen, thank you very much.